Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into the fascinating and honestly sometimes frustrating educational psychology behind a very misunderstood type of student. You know the one. We've all seen them, or hey, maybe you were one yourself. It's that student who clearly has the brains, but you look at their report card and it tells a completely different story. Today we're going to unlock the underachiever. We'll explore the hidden reasons why bright minds sometimes stall out, and more importantly, how we can get them back on track. So let's just dive right into the core question here. Why does a kid who is clearly smart end up failing their classes? It is literally one of the biggest puzzles for teachers, parents, and honestly the students themselves. We usually just assume that if you're smart, you're going to succeed academically. Boom, simple, right? But educational psychology tells us it's way more complicated than that. When a sharp student fails, it's rarely just a case of simple laziness. There's almost always a deeper mechanism at play, this hidden disconnect between what they are totally capable of doing and what they're actually producing. To solve this mystery, here's our quick roadmap for today. First, we'll clearly define what an underachiever is. Then, we'll look at the different types, spot the signs, identify the root causes, and finally, we'll cover how to reverse the trend. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, defining the underachiever. Now, an underachiever isn't just someone who gets bad grades. In educational science, it's specifically a learner whose achievement consistently falls well below their intellectual potential. Maybe their grades just fell off a cliff compared to how they used to do, or they're lagging way behind the expected standards for their age group, even though they clearly have the cognitive ability to hit those marks. Underachievement isn't about lacking the ability. It's this specific state of simply not working up to your own potential. Educational psychologist Sylvia Rim really hits the nail on the head here. The key word she uses is discrepancy. Basically, there's a tangible, measurable gap between what the child can do, which you can usually see in intelligence tests or their old report cards, and what they actually achieve day to day. Closing that specific gap, that is our main goal. We're not trying to make them smarter. We're just trying to clear the roadblocks that are stopping their existing smarts from showing up on paper. Which brings us to Section 2, types of underachievement. So not all gaps are created equal. There's actually a crucial difference between the two main categories we see. First up, you've got the situational underachiever. This is the kid who only performs when the mood strikes them, or maybe when they stumble onto a topic they find incredibly engaging. It's totally inconsistent. But contrast that with the chronic underachiever. Their struggles are deeply rooted in physiological or developmental reasons. They might have permanent emotional problems, and out of sheer frustration, they can even become aggressive. Understanding exactly which type of student you're dealing with, that completely changes how you approach helping them. All right, Section 3, spotting the signs. How do we catch this in the wild? You might think the biggest sign is apathy or rebellion, right? Actually, scratch that. The absolute primary characteristic of an underachiever is low self-esteem. At the very core of this whole discrepancy isn't laziness at all. It's a profound lack of self-belief. Deep down, these students just do not believe they can accomplish what teachers or parents expect of them. So they figure, well, why try and fail when I can just not try at all? Now, on the surface, this low self-esteem pops up academically in some super recognizable ways. You'll see incredibly poor study habits, foundational skills that were just never mastered, and an absolute refusal to do homework. They just can't persevere when things get tough. Plus, you might uncover hidden learning disabilities that have been masking their true intelligence this whole time. Essentially, to the untrained eye, it just looks like a frustrating lack of motivation. But the real story? That's told emotionally. Those academic struggles often snowball into serious behavioral issues. Think depression, social withdrawal, or downright hostility. A lot of the time, they have what's called a low internal locus of control. Basically, that means they feel like life just happens to them and they have zero power to change it. They lack goals, maybe don't even have hobbies, and they carry around these heavy feelings of inferiority. So when you see discipline problems in a bright kid, it's very often a mask for exactly this kind of emotional turmoil. Let's move on to Section 4, the root causes. Why is this actually happening? The educational data points to a whole mix of causes. Sometimes it's physical impairments that have just slipped under the radar. Often it's socio-psychological or family-related stuff, like a turbulent home life can completely drain the energy they need for school. But one of the most tragic, yet totally fixable causes is simply a poor fit between the child and their school environment. If you've got a highly creative, hands-on learner stuck in a rigidly structured, rote memorization classroom, they're gonna underachieve. And not because they aren't smart, but because the environment is literally suffocating their specific learning style. Before we talk solutions, we absolutely have to diagnose this right. There's a sharp distinction to make here. A student with a lower IQ who struggles, They're considered a slow learner, and they need a very specific type of academic support. But a student with an average or high IQ and poor performance, that's your underachiever. They don't need a slower pace. They need a completely different psychological and environmental intervention to unlock what's already in there. Which perfectly sets up Section 5, reversing the trend. Let's fix this. The experts have built this into a really solid 5-step game plan. Step 1 is all about early identification and counseling, catching it as early as possible. Step 2 involves special classrooms. Gifted underachievers absolutely thrive when the teacher-student ratio is small, the teaching is unconventional, and they have more control over their learning. Step 3 is adjusting school activities to offer a much more flexible curriculum. Step 4 is establishing a rock-solid homeschool interaction, so parents and teachers are a united front.
But Step 5 is probably the most vital concept of the whole bunch: unlearning. It treats underachievement as a learned behavior. And you know what? What is learned can be unlearned. This takes some serious teamwork, where the school psychologist helps teachers, parents, and the student recognize the factors that have been secretly rewarding their underachievement. Through counseling, whether that's individual, group, or family, these deeply ingrained feelings of inferiority can absolutely be reversed.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to chew on. Knowing that bad grades are so often just a mask for bright minds suffering from low self-esteem, a bad environmental fit, or just a lack of self-belief, what can we change about how we look at these kids? The next time you see a student struggling, instead of assuming they aren't smart enough or they just aren't trying, ask yourself, is this a discrepancy? And if it is, how can we help them build the bridge to finally close that gap? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explanation, and keep looking for that hidden potential.